When heaven renders a verdict, hell has no appeal, no loophole, and no veto power. That is not metaphorical poetry. It is spiritual law. And recently, somebody discovered this truth the hard way. You, the chosen one, have walked through seasons of being targeted, scapegoated, and misunderstood. You sat quietly in corners you didn't choose, weathering storms you didn't create, absorbing the venom of others because it seemed easier than striking back. They slandered you boldly, mocked you with confidence, and disrespected you without hesitation, convinced that no one would ever hold them accountable. They mistook your silence for surrender, your grace for weakness, and your humility for permission. But overnight, something broke. And it wasn't you. It was them. Because heaven raised up someone to defend you. And this isn't a casual defender or a distant cousin typing a rant on Facebook. This is someone with reach, authority, credibility, and no fear. Someone with receipts. Someone who doesn't care about the tears, titles, or tantrums of those who hurt you. This person isn't whispering. They're declaring. And the shock waves are undeniable. Suddenly, those who once laughed while you were bleeding are panicking under the pressure of truth being spoken aloud in places you were once banned from. Their dirty secrets, once tucked neatly away in the shadows, are now confession tapes on repeat, echoing in the very rooms where your name used to be mocked. And let's be real. Don't you love a plot twist? Especially the kind where villains get exposed by the very people they thought were on their team. It's like watching a toxic group chat implode in real time. Except the popcorn isn't optional, it's required. Because what shifted overnight wasn't just the storyline, it was the entire spiritual courtroom. The roles reversed, the accused has become the witness, the mocked has become the evidence, and the buried one has become the headline. Heaven waited until the moment was right, until their arrogance was loudest and their lies most brazen. And then heaven struck with truth so undeniable that no spin could erase it. The same people who were bold in their disrespect are stumbling over their words now. They strutted through their lies, confident there would never be consequences. They danced over the line, mocked you publicly, twisted narratives privately, and laughed at your pain as though it made them powerful. They truly believed you were powerless. But now the mask has shattered. And it isn't guilt they feel, it's panic. They're not trying to repent, they're trying to survive. They're scrambling to delete proof, rewrite history, distance themselves, and play neutral in the hope that the spotlight won't land directly on them. But it already has. Someone with authority is watching, and they aren't looking away. And what makes this moment divine is that you never begged for it. You never campaigned for someone to come rescue you. You didn't chase validation or scream your truth into the void, demanding to be heard. You kept walking, kept your integrity intact, endured the loneliness, endured the betrayal, endured the false narratives. And heaven honored that. Because truth doesn't need an army. It only needs one appointed voice. And when that voice is raised at the right time, the impact is greater than anything you could have orchestrated yourself. Now, the enablers, the silent ones, the so-called neutral ones, the spectators who watched you suffer and said nothing, are suddenly switching sides. Not because they've grown a conscience, but because they're afraid. Afraid of being exposed, afraid of being associated with lies that are crumbling in real time. They once laughed with your enemies, nodded along with false stories, and hid behind the shield of silence while you were being crucified. Now, as the truth unravels, they're scrambling to rebrand themselves as supporters, pretending they always knew, always believed, always cared. But don't be fooled. This isn't loyalty. It's damage control. They are not protecting you. They are protecting themselves from the fallout. And still, heaven's timing is perfect. The exposure didn't come while you were still bleeding, still piecing yourself back together, still crying prayers no one else heard. No, heaven waited. God waited until they were comfortable, until they thought they had gotten away with it, until their pride swelled so high they believed they were untouchable. It was then, in their boldness, that the truth cracked open and exploded, not in secret, but in full view, not in whispers, but with undeniable force. The very audience that once applauded their deception is now staring at their downfall, unable to unsee the receipts, the proof, the divine confirmation that you were never the problem. And the irony? You didn't have to lift a finger. You didn't need to go digging for proof or chasing justice with screenshots and arguments. Heaven planned someone in the very circles where your reputation was destroyed, someone on the inside, someone with credibility that outweighs every lie ever told about you. That person stepped forward not for clout, not for performance, but because the truth became too heavy to ignore. And now, in the very rooms where your enemies thought you had been erased, your name is being restored. The same lips that slandered you are trembling in silence. The same hands that pointed fingers are scrambling to wash themselves clean. And the same spectators who stayed quiet are rushing to jump ship before the flood of truth sweeps them under as well. This is what divine justice looks like. Not rushed, not forced, but timed with precision, so that when the revelation lands, it doesn't just correct, it redefines. Their mask didn't just slip, it shattered. And everyone who defended them, believed them, or enabled them is left holding pieces sharp enough to cut. The illusion has collapsed, and the ones who thought they buried you are now the ones trying to survive the burial of their own lies. And you never had to prove yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You never had to beg for space at a table that was never meant for you. Your silence became the loudest testimony. Your endurance became the evidence. And when heaven decided the moment was right, the truth rose like fire, undeniable, unshakable, unstoppable. You were always the proof. Would you like me to extend this even more into a multi-section spoken word style flow, almost like a long sermon or YouTube script that unfolds layer by layer for maximum intensity? You survived assaults that would have crushed the ordinary, attacks designed to erode hope, shred reputation, and rip the world out from under your feet. And you kept standing. Where most people would have answered fire with fire, you answered with steadiness. When the easiest, loudest, most human response was to explode, you chose restraint. And that restraint revealed a truth your enemies never meant to be seen. Calm is a kind of proof. You didn't scream, and it wasn't silence that hid you. It was a peace so fierce, it did the talking for you. Your composure, placed like a mirror against their chaos. And in that reflected image, their instability became unmistakable. Every time you chose grace over retaliation, you were not erasing pain, but building a case. Small acts of dignity, consistent boundaries, the quiet reclamation of your story. Each one a file, each one a witness, until there was no longer any doubt about who had been truthful and who had been acting. That slow, patient dossier of integrity didn't need your signature. Your life stamped it. And now someone else, someone with eyes that saw what you already knew, and a voice that refuses to be polite about injustice, has read the record. They saw the pattern, your steady breath against their panic, your rhythm against their frantic improvisations, your consistency against their manufactured chaos. They aren't muddled about who you are. They're not trying to translate your silence into weakness. They simply recognize the evidence and are naming it with clarity and force. They are speaking not to drown you out, but to amplify what your endurance already proved. You were never the accused. You were the witness. Your quiet didn't hide the truth. It made the truth impossible to ignore. And in the hands of someone who understands leverage, that quiet becomes the final paragraph in a case you never needed to litigate aloud. The defender who surfaced for you is not sentimental. They are strategic. They are not the sort who comforts at the edge of a battlefield and then walks away. They are the kind who storms the castle and brings down the pillars that sheltered the lies. This person's allegiance is not rooted in pity. It is rooted in principle. They see patterns where others saw isolated incidents, the manipulations, the networks of small cruelties disguised as private jokes, the slow engineering of a narrative meant to isolate you. They aren't content to murmur sympathy in safe quarters. They bring context, timelines, receipts, and a plan. Where cowardice once ruled in corners, this person moves with precise, surgical pressure. They don't debate cowards in alleyways. They take the case straight to the rooms that built and protected the deception. Their platform is not noise for noise's sake. It's access to people, to decisions, to reputations, and they use it to cut at the roots. Because they are calculated, your enemies find themselves under interrogation. They never imagined their stories cross-examined, their alibis failing under scrutiny, friends and accomplices rearranging themselves like people on a sinking ship. That fear is not ideology. It is consequence. They are now confronted not by you, the person they assumed had no support, but by someone who has influence where it matters and no appetite for mercy toward fraud. Suddenly, charm and rehearsed remorse are useless currency. This defender doesn't negotiate with manipulation, they dismantle it. And that kind of relentless, evidence-backed intervention is terrifying to people who built empires on someone else's silence. What your enemies intended as ammunition against you is now the very material that indicts them. Every covert screenshot, every chopped audio, every out-of-context quote, the tactical traps they laid thinking you would break, are backfiring, becoming an archive of their own obsession and cruelty rather than proof of your guilt. They collected dirt with surgical patience, confident that repetition would become reality. Instead, those same fragments are being reframed under scrutiny, the context restored, the timelines corrected, the motives exposed. Documents meant to humiliate are being reread as documentation of stalking and sabotage. Witnesses they bribed or bullied into agreement are being re-interviewed by people with no reason to protect the powerful. The tools of their campaign turn into nails in the coffin of their narratives, and the most brutal part for them is that this unraveling isn't happening in some future day of cosmic karma. It is unfolding now, in real time, in front of audiences who once cheered them on. You didn't have to manufacture a rebuttal because heaven, or whatever you name that divine movement toward justice, positioned someone inside the system who could reframe the evidence and show that the whole operation was never about truth, but about destroying you. The tables didn't just turn. The very instruments of their attack are now being repurposed as the instruments of their exposure. You have not merely been vindicated, you have been weaponized by something greater than personal vindication. This is not about the cheap satisfaction of revenge, it is about converting your suffering into catalytic power that dismantles the machinery of deceit. Every scar, every sleepless night, every time you swallowed a retort instead of weaponizing it, those things were not wasted. They were being forged into a kind of spiritual and moral ordinance. Scars that testify, stillness that argues, endurance that convinces. Your story has become an instrument used not for spectacle, but for correction. The person defending you is wielding it like a scalpel, exposing corrupt patterns, challenging complicit institutions, calling people into accountability rather than letting the cycle repeat. You are now more than a name cleared. You are the hinge around which an unjust narrative is being dismantled. Your survival is teaching others how to withstand character assassination. Your restoration is making a road for those who were next in line to be victimized. This is divine economy at work. What they intended for harm is being recoded as a force for systemic disruption. You did not have to become violent to be effective. Your endurance became the very leverage that toppled false kingdoms. This is not happenstance. This is judicial, spiritual, and strategic, a kind of legal warfare that operates on levels both seen and unseen. For a long time it looked like the powers arrayed against you had won. They had influence, access, and a willing choir of enablers. But while they celebrated, a case was being assembled, not a human conspiracy, but a providential one. Timing, testimony, corroboration, and the sudden appearance of someone who had both the will and the means to press the matter where it would count. That intervention is the visible sign of a verdict that has already been rendered in a higher court. The slow disintegration you are witnessing is the enforcement of that judgment. Doors that once opened for them are closing. People who once shielded them are stepping back. Deals they counted on are dissolving. The collapse is not chaotic, it is methodical. Divine order does not snatch and vanish. It orchestrates, aligns, and executes with a terrifying precision. You are not watching mere karma or petty retribution. You are watching a correction that has jurisdiction. Your wounds were not random. They were part of a refining process that prepared you for this role, not as a vengeful instrument, but as undeniable evidence of truth. Your presence in this moment matters because it proves that what they did could not erase you, and that resilience itself is a kind of moral authority that even the powerful cannot cheaply bribe away. So, stand tall in what's unfolding. Do not apologize for the magnitude of your vindication or minimize the force that moved on your behalf. This is not a season to shrink when the light is finally turned on. It is a time to hold your posture, maintain your boundaries, and let the architecture of justice do its work. Your silence, once misread as weakness, is now an irrefutable testimony. Your suffering has not been wasted. It has been transmuted into something that protects, corrects, and redeems. The person who stepped into the breach on your behalf is not merely a friend. They are evidence that you were never alone and that the universe has its own advocates. Let the ruin of false reputations be a trumpet for truth. This is not the end. It is a rebirth, a recalibration of what counts, who is trusted, and how power is measured. Keep walking in your grace. Because what once tried to bury you has only paved the way for a witness so compelling that the world must finally reckon. Your silence, once misread as weakness, is now an irrefutable testimony. Your suffering has not been wasted. It has been transmuted into something that protects, corrects, and redeems. The person who stepped into the breach on your behalf is not merely a friend. They are evidence that you were never alone and that the universe has its own advocates. Let the ruin of false reputations be a trumpet for truth. This is not the end. It is a reinvention, a recalibration of what counts, who is trusted, and how power is measured. Keep walking in your grace, because what once tried to bury you has only paved the way for a witness so compelling that the world must finally reckon. And don't overlook what's happening here. This isn't just about you being vindicated. It's about a shift in atmosphere. What was once a culture of lies, gossip, and manipulation has been dismantled at the root. Heaven didn't just silence your enemies. It rewired the room, rewrote the rules, and rerouted the energy. People are no longer applauding falsehood. They are recoiling from it. The environment that once rewarded deception now punishes it. And the stage where you were ridiculed has been turned into a platform for your restoration. The very space where you were diminished is now the place where your value echoes the loudest. So understand this. Your vindication is not small scale. It isn't just personal. It carries ripple effects that go far beyond you. Families, communities, workplaces, entire systems are now being forced to reconsider what they tolerated. The exposure is contagious. One truth leads to another. One revelation unlocks the next. And suddenly, a domino effect of justice begins. You once believed this was only about clearing your name. But heaven had a larger plan, turning your story into a blueprint, a precedent, and a warning. It has become a declaration. This is what unfolds when deception collides with divine timing. Now, someone else bears the weight of exposure. and it is far heavier than any weapon they ever tried to use against you. They are learning that exposure isn't a single moment, but a process, a slow, relentless unraveling that peels back every layer of illusion until only truth remains. At first, they thought they could contain it with excuses, disguise it with charm, or drown it out with louder lies. But exposure is alive. It moves, it breathes, it grows. It follows them into spaces they once believed were safe. It echoes in their voice when they try to explain themselves. It stares back at them through the eyes of those who once applauded but now observe with suspicion. It enters every room before they do, a shadow that refuses to detach. They will forever carry the memory of their failure to define you, to control you, to diminish you. Every whispered scheme, every subtle manipulation, every desperate attempt to shake your peace now stands as evidence of their own weakness, and the truth can no longer be escaped. You were never theirs to shape, never theirs to sway, never theirs to own. Your strength, your presence, your path, they have always been yours alone. Now, with every obstacle they built against you, you've risen higher, not merely beyond them, but beyond the limits they imagined for you. Shine. Let the world see what happens when someone refuses to shrink in the face of opposition. Because in your rise, others will discover their own hope, clarity, and courage to reclaim what belongs to them. And here's your call. If this truth stirs something within you, if you know the power of rising untouchable, step fully into it. Watch, learn, and join a community of those who refuse to settle for anything less than the life they were destined to live. Stand among others, awakening to their unstoppable path. Your story isn't just your own, it's part of a movement, and the world is finally ready to witness you.